computer. Okay, so we are finding ourselves in the Psalms, and we are on Psalm 36. And luckily, I have Nathan here, and Nathan will give us a good read through, I hope, and then we'll start in.
למנצח לעבד אדוני לדוד, נאום פשע רשע בקרב ליבי, אין פחד אלוהים לנגד עיניו, כי יחליק אליו בעיניו, למצוא עוונו לשנוא, דברי פיו אבן ומרמה, חדל להשכיל להיטיב, אבן יחשוב על משכבו, יתייצב על דרך לא טוב, רע לא ימאס, אדוני בהשמיים חסדך, אמונתך עד שחקים, צדקתך כהראל, משפטיך תהום רבה, אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני, ויקר חסדך אלוהים ובני אדם, בצל כנפיך יחסיון, ירביו מדשן ביתך, ונחל עדניך תשכם, כי עמך מקור חיים, ואורך נראה אור. משול חסדך ליודעך וצדקתך לישרי לב. אל תבואני רגל גאווה ויד רשעים, אל תנידני. שם נפלו פועלי אבן, דוחו ולא יכלו קום.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Okay. Benson's coming. Oh, let's see. Okay, I got everybody. Okay. So first of all, I will say that one of these, we are now embarking on at least a two psalm exploration of evil people. We're going to be talking a lot about what it means to be evil, which should be interesting. And the very first verse is going to be a little problematic because the translators seem to go very far to avoid a literal translation, but the literal translation is super interesting. So we're gonna the second verse actually. So the first verse is our colophon, Lamnatzech la'eved Adonai David. So it's interesting. So Lamnatzech, we don't know exactly what that means. Natseach I think that most people understand to be as an instruction for the conductor, for the person who kind of keeps it going, the person who kind of keeps the music going. That's why he's the conductor. But it says La'eved Hashem David, for God's servant David. And I think this is the only place where you have that colophon. It's the only place where, we do have David for David, but it's the only place where he calls himself, or where he is called Eved Hashem, where he's called God's servant. And I'm not sure why that's significant yet, but keep in mind that question of like, okay, so how does the rest of this psalm kind of reinforce this idea of David being God's servant? Now, number 2, which is really verse 2, which is really the first line of the Tehillah. I'm going to read it to you literally. Okay, so Naum Pesha L'Rasha B'Kerev Libi. So sin or pesha or error, okay, if you could error, sin speaks to the wicked one in the depths of my heart, the B'Kerev Libi. Right, that's a pretty literal translation of the verse. Rabbi Steinsaltz actually translates it, just to give you a sense. He translates it as, sinfulness speaks to the wicked one in my heart. There is no fear before him. Now, interesting, this translator gets nervous about that. And he says, sin, it seems to me, beckons the wicked one not to keep the fear of God before him. Now, so the literal reading to me preserves a kind of that sense of inner dialogue. For those of us who have been, I'm sorry if I'm going to be referential, if I'm going to referring to my Wednesday class, but I think sometimes it's helpful. So on the Wednesday class, we've been talking about the Yetzer Hara, right? We've been talking about the evil inclination, and we have this kind of dialogue going on with right. That's the kind of literary conceit that Rav Bachya Mikuda is using, is this idea of an inner dialogue between the seichel, between the intellect, and the Yetzer Hara and the evil inclination. So here it seems to be referring to something like that. He says that there's something, there's a wicked voice, right? There's a voice of wickedness that speaks inside my heart. And maybe it's a little, I don't know whether it's troubling that David HaMelech, somebody who is so holy as King David, should have this experience, or whether it's comforting. I'm not sure whether it's troubling or comforting, but he seems to be saying that he has this within him. And it says, "En pachad Elohim neged einav." He says, and when this voice is speaking, when this is speaking inside me, when this is speaking inside my heart, it says not to keep the fear, to have pachad Elohim neged einav. Remember, it said pachad. We said there are two kinds of fear. One is yirah, right, which is awe and respect, and is of something which feels distant. Pachad is the fear of something which is close, which feels immediate. And so the message that's coming from inside of him is ein pachad Elohim neged einav. He says that I'm not going to have that fear of God before my eyes. It's not going to be an immediate experience, right? Maybe it might be an intellectual experience. Maybe it might be an intellectual experience, but there's something in the heart. There's something in the heart that blocks the immediacy of that. And then it continues, Ki chadlik elav be'edav. It's alluring to him. And literally, it's a weird way to translate it, but it's like chalikas v'chalak means to be smooth. Excuse me. Throat clearing time. Hold on 1 second. Fasting 1, 2, 3. Okay, the voice is back. Okay, so it means to be soft. So it's to be soft, to be smooth. So ki hardik elav be'edav, it becomes sin, this pesha, this sin becomes smooth to him, becomes alluring to him. Umtso avono lisno. He says, and when his wrongs emerge, right, God recoils from him. It's the way he translates it here. Now, you could understand that very differently. These first verses are difficult. So Rav Steinsaltz takes it differently. He says, in his eyes, he glides past. That's how he's that sliding sound of chalik, right? That's how he deals with that. He glides past him to find his iniquity to hate, right? So he says that the hate, lisno, to hate, is what that negativity inside of us is inspiring, right? Not that God is going to recoil from him, but that there's a hate builds up. So if we take if we sort of take the narrative, if we take the narrative literally, right? I have this voice that's in, I have this voice that's inside. I have this pesha, this sin which is inside, which is speaking to the wicked one that lives inside my heart, and says, not to be afraid of God in that immediate way, and kind of seduces me into a state of hatred. Divrei piv aven v'mirma. He says what he says is unjust and deceitful. Now it's very interesting. Why would it be mirma? There's a very interesting point that many of the Balei Musar, the teachers of ethics, and the Hasidic masters say is, look, says the Yetzer Hara, our negative side, never tells us to sin, right? Because we're not going to do it, right? If it said, if our Yetzer Hara, if our evil inclination told us to sin, said, hey, listen, okay, I want you to please hate, please do that. We're not going to listen. Not going to listen. So it has to be b'mirma. It has to be deceitful. We have to be told that we're doing something good, not that we're being told, not told that we're doing something bad. So there has to be a certain amount of deceit involved in this inner inclination, this thing in our heart. This is chadal, so l'dal haskil lehitiv, and it's given up. It has given up. It has stopped to consider how to improve. So now it's interesting. So what's the best? How do you get somebody to stop to improve? You tell them that they're perfect already. That's the easiest way to get somebody to stop to improve. Right? If you tell them perfect already. So the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Hara, all it has to do is say, you know what? Oh, it's so amazing. You're so learned. You're such an amazing person. You're so great. You're so generous. You're so kind. You're so wonderful. You're so awesome. No, there's nothing could be improved in you, right? And says, and that can be the kind of mirma. And we'll see later that he talks about the ego. But the person hadal haskil lehetiv. This is the person is given up on improving. Of course, this is one of the most dangerous states that we can possibly find ourselves, right? If we're not good, right? If we're not good, that's bad. Right? If we're not good, that's bad. But if we don't want to be good, that's worse, right? Because that means that there's no chance of our getting better. So, it's much more dangerous not to want to be good than to be bad. Okay. Aven Yachshov Mishkavo says in his bed, he plans to do wrong. Linda is saying, Psalm 36 describes the traits of the wicked: deceit, rebellion, lack of moral awareness. How does this portrayal of wickedness resonate with your feelings towards someone who has harmed you? Is it possible that acknowledging their true nature fuels your anger and justifies your hatred? We'll talk about that. Actually, between 36 and 37, we're going to be doing a lot of talk about the wicked. And maybe at the end of that, we need to have a long discussion about, like, okay, so what does it mean now? Now that we've sort of decided that there's such a thing as the wicked, and we know what it is, right? Or we have a description of it. So now how do we deal with it, right? And how are we supposed to feel about it? And, are we supposed to love the wicked? Are we supposed to hate the wicked? Are we supposed to be transforming the wicked? How do we deal with that, and talk about some possible approaches, because that does come up. And also he seems to, you'll see, he often makes this in the next two Psalms, he makes this contrast between the wicked and the good, between the good guys and the bad guys. And I have in my world, right, if I try to find myself in the Psalms, I know about myself that I'm both a good guy and a bad guy. And I know that of all the people I know, except for Harry, everybody's a good guy or a bad guy. Harry is only a good guy. But everybody else I know is either a good guy or a bad guy. So Okay, but he says, okay, so now in his bed, he plans to do wrong. And I love this image, right? Because, it's like he's alone, right? The wicked person, he or she is alone, and it's late at night, and they're laying in bed, right? And what are they doing? They could be thinking about, unicorns and balloons and all sorts of beautiful things and flowers, but no, they're plotting evil. Right? They're sitting there plotting evil. Yityatev al derech lo tov, ra lo yimas. He says, and they're set on a path without any good, and they're not deterred by evil. It says literally, ra lo yimas. They're not disgusted by evil, right? Most people have yimas really is a expression of disgust. They're not disgusted. And by the way, if I make a mistake in my Hebrew, Nathan, you have to correct me. But it is something like something which is gross, right? So it doesn't. They don't have the normal negative reaction that people have to evil, right? See, somebody who's both good and bad, right? Who's laying on their bed and thinks something bad, right? Is plotting evil for somebody, right? They may think to themselves, "Oh, that's nasty," right? That they feel they'll have a reaction to it. He says, but here it says, they've put themselves on a path of no good, and they're not deterred by evil. They're not freaked out by evil, right? They've lost their sensitivity, right? They've lost their sensitivity to those things are evil. Adonai b'shamayim chazdecha. So it says, so God, your kindness is in heaven. Now he switches. He switches, and now he starts to talk. And now he starts to talk to God. Right now he starts to talk to God, and he says, God says, your kindness is in heaven, and your faithfulness is gone back to the sky. Faithfulness really is your ability to trust, like trustworthiness, if that makes sense, is the best way, or in loyalty or trustworthiness. But here, trustworthiness, your faithfulness, your trustworthiness has gone. And he says, back to the sky, kind of like you've been pushed away. I mean, that's how the interpreter understands it. It's interesting. And I didn't look at the commentaries this week. My head was in some other space. But it would be interesting to look at them to see that where he's getting this from. But it's interesting. He says, Tzidkatzcha kare'el. He says, and your righteousness is like mighty mountains. Mishpatecha tahom rabbah, and your judgment, right? It says your judgment is like the lowest depths. Right? It's interesting, right? You get this very physical, you get this very geographical image, right? There's your righteousness is the height of the mountains, right? And your mishpat, your judgment, right? Your judgment goes down to the depths of the world. Adam behemot toshia Adonai, says, you save it's literally both humans and animals. He says the wise and the humble, right? The wise and the humble, but it says literally humans and animals, right? Save both humans and animals. So he has this moment where sometimes it goes the opposite. Sometimes he starts out talking about God, and suddenly he remembers the wicked, right? And this time he's remembering the wicked, and suddenly he remembers God. But part of what he says, he's talking about tzedek and mishpat. He's talking about justice, right? About justice, righteousness, and judgment, right? Righteous in judgment. So he's saying, okay, here's the evil, but you know what? He says you shouldn't. This person who's plotting, right? Right? He should know. He should know. I should know, because remember that we started out with his heart, right? We started this out. I should know. I should know that there is a God, that he is righteous, right? And that his righteousness goes all the way up to the top of the world, and that his judgment takes us all the way down to the bottom of the world. And that if we're, and it says, and if we are, and he can save a human being and even an animal, right? To call a human being a behemoth, right? It says if it really means here Adam, a person, the Baal Shem Tov said that the whole purpose of a person being in this world is to become an Adam, is to become a human being. Right? We come into the world. I know people say this all the time. We say, I'm a good human being. I'm a good human being. As if being a good human being is like a simple thing. To be a good human being is really difficult, right? So to be a real human being, to be what Adam was meant to be what Adam was meant to be is a huge, huge, huge thing. So he says, and most of us are kind of at the level of behemoths. Most of us kind of act kind of like animals, right? We eat, we drink, we eat, we drink, we reproduce, we sleep, right? We do our work. A lot of us live like domesticated animals. Thank God, like domesticated animals, not like wild animals. We're not eating each other alive, which is good. Some of us are even vegetarians, like domesticated animals. But okay. So it's God. You see, now he says, how precious is your kindness. He says, how precious is your kindness. People shelter in the shadow of your wings. I love this. I love this image. When I think of the shelter of the shadow of your wings, I think of my my grandfather. So I used to sit in synagogue with my grandfather. My grandfather wore a prayer shawl, right? And he would go pretty much every day because he lived in an old people's community and they needed a minyan. They needed to have 10 people to pray. And I was a little kid. And I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents. And so I'd go with my grandfather. And my grandfather would kind of sit me next to him and he would wrap his talit around me. He'd wrap his prayer shawl around me. And I would sit there and play with the fringes. And that was my thing. But I felt so safe and warm and nice, and it was like, that was like, that was like my place. And so here it says that how precious yakar, how precious is your kindness, and he compares it to being under the shadow of your wings. Yirviyun medeshim betecha says they are filled with with the plenty of your house. Says they're filled with the stream with the plenty of your house and from the stream of your delights that you give them to drink. Right. So now he's talking about the people who have taken refuge, who have kind of wrapped themselves under the garment of Hashem, under the wings of Hashem, so to speak, right, under God's protection. They're filled with the plenty of your house, and from the stream of your delights, tashkem, you give them to drink. Right, it's a very paradisical image, right, and sort of a beautiful kind of image of a paradise. Kimcha makor chaim says, for you because with you is the source of life. He was the source of life. And this is an important point to remember, that life is the ultimate mystery, right? We don't understand Anybody who's, I don't know, if you've ever been with somebody who went in the moment they passed away, uh, eh, you realize that suddenly the person who was there is suddenly not there. You don't, you know, that life force, is gone, and there's an incredible mystery there. We don't know how to create life. We don't know how to create life. We know how to do a lot of things. I don't think we know how to create life. We can manipulate life. We can do all sorts of cool things with life now. But I don't think we can create life in that sense, in the true sense. But that God is the source of the life force, at all times, not just, okay, he brings, he brought the leaves into being. I'm looking out the window. There's a window right there. If I look like I'm spacing out, there's a window right there. He brought it's not just that he brought the tree into being, but he brings the tree into being every day in a new way. It's constantly changing. It's constantly adapting to its environment. The whole ecosystem around it is completely just changing all the time. This was means to be the Makor Chaim, to be the source of life, the source of life and all of its diversity and all of its changes, and in every single moment. Ba'orecha nireh or, and in your light we see light. I don't even know where to begin to think about what that means. Sebastian said he was with his mom when she departed. Do you know that feeling? It's a very weird feeling, because for a moment, like, what life is, like, or what life isn't. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a strange feeling for me. At least it was a strange feeling for me. Okay, and in your light, we see light. What do you think that means? Help me. It screams Darshani, interpret me, but I don't know what it means. In your light, we see light. I feel like I know what it means. It's beautiful. Yes, it's true. Yeah, we say this verse when we wrap ourselves in a talit. That's true. Yeah.
I think that light is something you can't block out, right? Like even when your eyes are closed, like you see some light through that. So you would think that light is something that you see. But what it's saying here is even to see light requires divine light. I don't know if I'm being clear.
I love, if you look at hell, hell looks back at you. Yeah, it's also true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like that our ability to experience things, our ability, like you said, sometimes we say, metaphorically, the lights are on, when you talk about a person, I mean that you're aware, so that, kind of our awareness comes from something which God gives us. It's not our awareness. It's not something that it's not like it comes from nothing. And that would sort of fit with the Makor Chaim, source of life, not just source of life, but also source of consciousness.
Can I interrupt you and just say
Yeah.
also that we can only achieve certain kinds of like brain circuitry when we are in certain kinds of emotional states. So we need a certain kind of light in order to achieve awareness of things. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's have you ever seen one of those, what are they called? The brain scans, where it shows the lights going off in your brain, right? And if you get upset and you get upset, all of a sudden the prefrontal cortex goes dark.
Yeah. Like it makes you, some emotions make you dumb.
Right. Right. You just, if you're, just so you know, okay, if your pulse goes above about 90 or so, chances are that your prefrontal cortex is turned off. You're basically an alligator on two legs, and you
Yeah.
should shut up.
You're a big driving the bus. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't talk. He says, okay, Tavieni regel gava, says, let not the feet of the arrogant, okay. So there are two ways, let me see how he translates, because this is a little different. Yes, so it says here, let no arrogant foot come, it says, come to me. Let no hand of the wicked drive me away. Now, interesting that, so the Baal Shem Tov actually referred to this verse in his dying words. This was part of his dying words. He referred to this verse, and the way he understood it is he was talking about himself. Antaveni regel gava says, I don't want to be carried on the feet of arrogance. He says, what's that supposed to mean? So that just as your feet are what supports you, what kind of holds you up, you don't want what holds you up in this world to be your arrogance. Right? If that's the point upon which you stand, right? If that's a point upon which you stand, it says you're in big trouble, because really arrogance is a kind of idolatry, right? Because arrogance is putting yourself in the position where God should be, right? It's that becomes what is most important to you. It's supposed to be God that's most important to you. But if you're putting yourself in the play, if you're putting yourself as the most important thing, you're putting yourself where God is supposed to be. And so he said, please, in his last words, he says, please don't let me go with these feet of arrogance. But here he says, let the feet of the arrogant not be near me. The yad rashayim al tenideni, and don't let the hand of the wicked move me. And he says, so the way the Baal Shem Tov seemed to understand it was, again, going back to the beginning, because remember the beginning, he was talking about his own heart, right? He was talking about Kerev Libi, right, in the depths of my heart. They're saying, okay, I got this stuff going on in the depths of my heart. There's stuff going on there, right? That's calling to me, and it's tricking me, and it's seducing me into various things. It's making me confused. It says, but listen, it shouldn't be in my hands and feet. Right? Your feet, your hands and feet, that's, your feet decide where you're going to go, and your hands decide what you're going to do. Right? So it shouldn't be manifest. They don't decide what you're going to do. They actuate what you're going to do. So it shouldn't be manifested in my hands and feet. Okay, it's in my heart. Okay, all sorts of things are going on in my heart. Okay, maybe all sorts of things are going on in my heart, but at least, let my feet be going in the right place. Let my hands be doing the right thing, and I shouldn't be affected by that. And he says, Sham naflu polei aven. He says, then those who act wrongly will fall. Dohu v'lo yachlukum. Says they'll be pushed aside. Says unable to rise. Right, which actually kind of leads into the next psalm, which is going to talk more about those who are villainous and so forth. But that those who are the pole aven. Actually, that makes sense. The people who do wrong, right? The people who do wrong. I hadn't thought about it this way, but one way you could think about it is just me off the top of my head is that, yeah, we said before, Bekerev Libi, it's inside my heart, okay, but maybe not in my hands and not in my feet. So as long as I'm not a pole oven, I'm not a person who's actually doing bad things, right? But if I am doing bad things, dohu, I'm pushed down and I can't get back up, right? And the problem with and take this back to the arrogance, right? normally we fall and we can get back up, right? Normally we're able to fall and get back up. In fact, most of life is falling and getting back up, right? If you're gonna, that's what a lot of life is, right? It's you mess up, you fix it, you make yourself better. And he's saying here, says no, but there's also a way of falling that you can't get up. And what's the condition? The condition is arrogance. That if you're arrogant, he says that's the only thing that will keep you from getting back up. Any other condition you can get yourself back up from, right? Because with humility, you're able to do tshuva, you're able to repair yourself, right? Remember, he said before that you don't want to repair yourself. You said you're not able to consider doing things better. So because of that mindset, that arrogant mindset, that it becomes impossible to pick yourself back up, right? But if you don't have that arrogant mindset, then you should be able to pick yourself up so you can fall and you can get back up. So, thoughts, questions? Yes, Nathan.
Thank you. I would like to write a song. Thank you for sharing that Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. I haven't heard it before, but I think we mentioned last class, and it's an idea I had before. We come across a verse that is familiar to me, but the rest of the psalm isn't. And so I had this idea before this class. What if I take, sometimes I have heard like Jewish songs that are from a verse near the beginning of a chapter and a verse near the end of it. And what if we connected a verse from the beginning and the verse near the end so that we'd be reading the psalm and we'd say, oh yeah, this is the psalm with that later verse. And so what I'd like to do, and perhaps we could work on this together, I don't know, write a verse about Ne'um Peshel Arasha Bekerev Libi and Al Tivoni Rego Gava B'Yad Rasha'im Al Tinideni. Linking those two verses about him, it can be in my heart, but it won't be in my hands. And
that would be great. That would be great. That's nice.
Do you know of any song that connects verse 2 to verse 12 by any chance? Has anyone heard that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. It's waiting to be done. That's a great idea. That's a lovely idea. Yeah. More thoughts?
There is a sort of chiastic structure to the psalm.
Okay.
It starts off and it ends up with the evil, and in the middle there's a few verses of chesed, and then around verse 9 and 10 there's, I think, the heart of the psalm. So I think, Nathan, your idea of linking the start and the end, I think, was there in the original poet sort of conception here.
That's right. Beautiful. Yeah. There is that makes sense. There is that kind of chiastic. So chiasm. So one of the great features of Jewish literature, this is or at least of Torah literature, is this structure called a chiasm. So a chiastic structure, the way that kind of works is kind of imagine you have a structure like A in the beginning, A at the end, B in the B, C, and then something in the middle. So what it does is it focuses your attention. It has a way of focusing your attention on the thing in the middle, and A relates to A and B relates to B. So it makes perfect sense, as you said, right? That the second verse should relate to the second to last verse makes perfect sense. So that's and that structure is found at many levels in many levels in Torah. It can be sometimes you find it in individual verses, sometimes you find it in stories, sometimes you find it sometimes you find it in all sorts of. There are many different places and many different ways in which the same structure is used. It's kind of like a I don't know. It's a kind of a commonplace in Torah literature. Okay. More thoughts? Okay, well, everybody knows how to get a hold of me. I hope if you have thoughts, if something comes to you, if you have a dream, if you have whatever happens, okay, please let me know. And thank you so much for coming. I hope I'll see some of you on Wednesday as well. And Sebastian, go put out your fires, and see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.